Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Recruit Military Live, a continuing series of live broadcasts covering all things military transition, veteran employment, milspouse employment, and much, much more. My name is Lucas Connolly, retired U.S. Army officer and former TAP program manager, here to share with you the ins and outs of making the move to civilian world of employment. If you're in search of meaningful employment, well, you're in the right place. Please visit rmvets.com/live to learn more. All right. Of 800 CEOs polled in 2019, the overwhelming majority cited the ability to attract and retain quality workers as their top concern. In the highly competitive space, to attract and retain the very best employees, a talent war is being waged in a way which not only challenges companies to adapt their hiring practices, but also challenges candidates to adapt the way they market themselves in all stages of the hiring process. Today's guest knows exactly what is necessary for companies to attract high potential job candidates, and for those candidates to stand out not just for their past performance, but for the exceptional talent and potential they possess. Today's guest is coming to us live from Austin, Texas. Following a successful career as an Army officer, George Randall transitioned to the human resources and talent acquisition field, serving the last 10 plus years as a global HR executive and leader. The teams he has built and led have hired over 80,000 professionals in more than 60 countries, no small feat, to include hiring and evaluating and assessing over 2,500 executives. Of the many things he's learned over the years is the fact that it is leadership and character that distinguishes the best talent. Today, he'll be talking to us about some of the things that job seekers need to know and understand to distinguish themselves as talented, high potential candidates that the very best companies are looking to hire. Ladies and gentlemen, join me welcoming to the show Mr. George Randall.
Hey, brother. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. It's good to be here.
Hey, thanks for taking the time to be with us today. And for the folks in the audience, now that you know who we are, we'd love to hear who you are. Where are you from? Who are you with? Who'd you serve with? Are you in transition? Are you retired? Are you a milspouse, veteran job seeker, or some other status I haven't thought of? Feel free to jump into that chat. Get your questions, comments, and concerns in there, and time allowing, we will address them. George, really great to have you here. Before we dive into the subject matter, start talking about interviews and resumes and LinkedIn and all that greatness, can you just give us a little bit of some backstory about yourself, going back to your early days, way back in 1984 when you raised your hand and enlisted? I know we're all starting to feel a little old here. To get to where you are today.
Yeah, to be able to explain that masochistic gene in me that said, okay, go ahead and enlist in the Army, have a colorful tongue, and then, somebody looked at me and they said, hey, if you think you're so smart, why don't you go be one of them there officers? I shrugged my shoulder. I said, how hard could it be? Those famous last words.
Yeah.
So I went on to be an officer through ROTC, really won the lottery. I joked that I had a less than sober assignments officer who put my name on a dart, threw it over his shoulder at a globe, and it hit the Berlin Brigade in 1989. So I was very fortunate to be in a stable of officers where it was always their second or third, officer tour. Deployed to Africa, Gitmo, South America, Panama, and did 2 years of line company command. But after I got done, I knew kind of that leadership bug that was in me. I had run out of space to do that. And so I jumped into the corporate world, went through a military recruiting firm, found a firm, did very, very well. Horrible fit, oil and water, but I still did well, like most military vets do. It doesn't matter what you put in front of us. We're going to do great things. But for some reason, I was afforded the opportunity to move back to Austin, Texas with family. And they said, hey, can you do HR? So back to my officer days, shrugged my shoulders and said, how hard could it be? And a light bulb went off in my head. And that light bulb was what I really enjoyed about the military and my brothers and sisters in arms was building teams. And so I got into talent acquisition, and 20 some years later, it has just been an amazing ride, something I'm still very passionate about. Hired for some of the biggest firms in the world, HP, hedge funds, Booz Allen Hamilton, a bunch of them, and have enjoyed myself all along the way. And now, was able to write a book called The Talent War, How Special Operations and Great Organizations Win on Talent. And now I'm a managing partner in an executive search firm. So it's just been a great ride, and I feel very, very blessed, and I wouldn't be here without my time in the military.
Now, suffice it to say, 2 decades in uniform and an additional 2 decades in talent acquisition and recruiting. You probably know a thing or two about that transition from military to civilian life. Over the last 2 decades, though, and we, some of the younger folks may lack the understanding that, 10 and 15 years ago, there were no automated, applicant tracking systems. There was no
Oh
LinkedIn.
no.
I mean, a lot has changed in the last 20 years. What trends are you seeing as we go into 2023?
Oh, do you know how painful it is to say that I did a resume on the very first version of a word processor? And there was no LinkedIn. You literally faxed resumes. Yeah, the trends that I'm seeing now is LinkedIn really leveled the playing field for everybody, both on the company side, the agency side, and also the candidate side. You have this amazing platform. Although I don't like, there's a lot of people adding a little too much personal and political, and I'm hoping that they kind of trim that back a little bit. But it is a big equalizer for people to be connected all across the world to the best jobs, best companies, and the best candidates. And so getting LinkedIn right, both from a company side and a candidate side, is absolutely critical to your success. And understanding what needs to be on there, how you need to present yourself, and additionally how you use LinkedIn if you're a candidate is probably one of the most important skills for veterans transitioning right now.
Yeah, no longer do you need that $50,000 a year golf club membership to get in front of a C-suite executive or an HR manager for a Fortune 50 company.
No, you don't. And there still are some good things, though. I remember seeing some guys wearing $2,000 suits in the Reagan National Airport, and I decided to buy him a beer. And I just said, "Hey, I'm a military veteran transitioning. I love that Breitling watch. I like that Panerai watch. I'll buy you all a round of beers if you tell me how you got where you are." And I got an earful for the cost of 4 beers. So there's still those things to do. But yeah, how you present yourself it really is everything, because there are multiple first impressions that a candidate is going to make on a company and a potential employer.
Absolutely. Now, when we think about this automation piece, it expands access, and that's great, but it's a double-edged sword, right? Now, not
Huge.
only do you have access, everybody else has access. Anybody that has an internet connection
Yep.
or even a smartphone is now your competitor. A couple of weeks ago, we talked, and you talked about recruiter math. And as you dive into these application processes, you have to understand recruiter math. Can you break down recruiter math for us?
I'll do it as simple as I can. First and foremost, it comes from the term, when I would hear from candidates that there's a black hole that my resume went into. Oh, I'm the perfect candidate. That job's just handwritten for me. Why didn't they choose me? It must have gone into a black hole. Well, here's the simple fact. Of all of the departments that are lean in a company, the human resources and talent acquisition functions are the most lean. They always are. They're considered overhead wrongly, but they are. And so if I'm a recruiter, we'll do very, very simple math to explain this. If I'm a recruiter and I have an average of 15 and now 20 open positions, I have 20 different hiring managers. The candidates that I have to see, I have to get at least 4 to 5 candidates in front of a hiring manager, which means when I post a job out there, and I'm going to post 20 of them for 20 different managers, that whoever applies first is going to be the first resume I look at. Despite AI, despite all of these things, if you're the first to apply, you're first in, first out. The only people, and this is a very critical point for veterans, the only people that bubble to the top of any applicant tracking system is an employee referral.
Okay.
They get coded differently. Companies incentivize employee referrals, but first in, first out. So if I'm a recruiter, I've got 20 hiring managers that had to go through an approval process and said, "George, I need this position. I needed it filled 2 weeks ago. Pressure's on me." 20 posted. Every time I posted, I'm going to get 30 to 40 applications at a minimum because of the electronic age. My job is to fill that not with the ideal candidate, but with somebody well qualified. So if I go to my first position and it takes me 6 resumes to get 4 people. That's as far as I'm going down the list because I have 19 other positions I have to get to. And of those 19, each have 40 or 50 applicants. I don't even have time to reject the people below it. Now I have those 4 or 5 people that have to go to the hiring manager, that have to go to the 4 or 5 people that they're going to interview. And oh, by the way, I got to go back and forth to the candidate. So on one rec, one position, I'm a recruiter that's trying to manage my time and schedule 6 different people on one position. Now multiply that by 20, multiply by the back and forth of scheduling between candidates who can or cannot make it because they're in another job. Those numbers become astronomical. And so a recruiter is operating on speed, efficiency, organization, and trying to get the best candidate they can in the shortest amount of time. It doesn't mean they're skimping on quality because you could go through all 50 and eventually you'll find a better candidate, but why? You're going to only make angry 19 other hiring managers. So recruiter math, if you're number 15 on the list that's applied, you're not going to get seen, even if you are the best candidate. The recruiters have to operate. And so that's recruiter math. It's not a black hole. It's time.
And I think that goes to the point is why those connections, that networking piece is so critical, because you might be the best candidate, but you're buried 50 deep in a list. And if you want to bypass some of that bureaucracy, for lack of a better word, you've got to make a connection that'll pull you forward and have you become an employee referral.
And in today's environment with the talent war going on, they're doubling and tripling employee referral bonuses. So it behooves people in the company to become their own talent scouts and get them to the recruiter and get them in the system of records so they can get paid on their next paycheck if this person gets hired. By the way, if you see a position that's been open for 30 days, it doesn't mean that it hasn't, that you should still apply. It simply means they're still in the interview process. They're not taking new applications, but they can't close it until they get an accepted offer. So if you see something that's open longer than 4 or 5 days, move past it.
Good advice. Good advice. Now, rising above the fray, standing out, and not disappearing into the background like a Where's Waldo puzzle. Pretty critical. A lot of folks are still wedded to the kind of the older models of checking the boxes on hard skills. Must have the right education. Must have the right skills. List A, B, and C qualifications. Some of these performance-based models are really focused on past performance, the box checks, the distinguish, the qualifiers, the red flags. But folks are starting to move towards the talent-focused model. What would you say are some of the qualities and attributes that you look for when you're trying to find those high potential candidates, not just focused in the rearview mirror on what they've done in the past?
Well, the 9 that we articulated in the book, but when I'm looking for an executive, when I'm looking for an entry-level hire, even an intern, I'm going to look for several of the same things. Number 1 is team ability. When you go into a company, you're not accomplishing things on your own, even if you're in a sales environment. And as much as salespeople are coin operated and they're driven by individual KPIs, the fact is you're going to be on a team. So team ability is number 1. Number 2 is drive. Do you have the drive to show up every day and give it your best? I don't care if somebody pays you $1 or I don't care if they pay you $500,000. It's your name. It's your brand. If you agree to the contract, work your ass off, drive hard every single day. Number 3 goes without question is integrity, that you're going to do what you say you're going to do, even when people aren't looking, and you're going to do the right thing. Above that, resiliency and resiliency and effective intelligence are the 2 big things. Resiliency, not everything's going to go your way. We've all been in the military. We've all lived with Murphy's Law. Things rarely turn out the way you plan. The first plans never stays intact. You have to be resilient, find a way to solve the problem, accomplish the mission. And then the last thing is effective intelligence. I want somebody, and look, if I can digress a little bit, effective intelligence it's the go-to person, almost like the E4 mafia in the military, to be honest with you. Meaning if you give them a mission, they're always going to get it done, even if they don't have enough information. The effective intelligence is somebody who can solve problems where no previous book solution existed. When you can demonstrate that, hey, no matter what's in front of me, I'm going to be resilient and find a way to accomplish it. And even if I don't have the data, the resources, if I don't have all of the information, I'm still going to problem solve through this and bring about a positive solution. Those are the things that I need to see in a candidate Because if I see those, I can train almost everything else.
These qualities may be hard to represent in a resume. Team ability, I don't think I've ever seen that in anybody's resume. How does a candidate who knows they possess these skill sets, these attributes, how do they market themselves to the talent acquisition manager, to the recruiter, to the HR director?
Well, the first and foremost, you can articulate those in a resume, but one of the things that TAP and ACAP centers have gotten wrong, and most people have gotten wrong, if you have 7 to 10 years, or in my case, decades of experience, I hate chronological resumes.
Okay.
I mean, how many people scroll on a text? How many people scroll on an email? You're asking a recruiter to scroll through all of your assignments to find out which one's the most relatable. So first and foremost, go to a functional resume. And
Okay.
from a functional resume, there's an ability, or there's a way in a functional format to summarize what kind of person you are. And using, words like collaborative, the team builder, the team grower. There's all kinds of words in the English language that can help create a written picture that puts in their mind that you are a team player and a team builder. You absolutely can do that, but where that's going to come out is absolutely in the interview.
Okay. All right. So when it comes time to get to the interview, what are some of the key things that they need to highlight?
Well, I'm going to jump ahead on one thing, and I
Feel free.
hate the STAR method.
Let's dive into it.
I hate
Everybody
the
says it,
STAR.
right? And I'll tell you what, when we talked about the STAR method a couple of weeks ago, and you told me, hey, I hate the STAR method, I was like, oh, hold on a second, pump the brakes. I
Yeah.
think I'm about to learn something.
It,
What about the
it,
STAR method is wrong?
it's so look, if you've been in just look at it this way. If you've been in the military and you've had a senior officer, flag officer ask you a question, did you answer in the STAR format?
No.
Well, sir, ma'am, at the time, this was the situation I faced. This is the task I was given. About that time, you're giving a pint of blood in that briefing.
Yeah,
It's
you're gonna
really
get
what
blown
it
out of the
comes.
water.
You're going to get. Now, imagine your spouse, and your spouse asks you a question. The longer you talk, the more guilty they are. What should happen? It's not that the STAR method is completely irrelevant, but it's the bottom line up front. When you write emails, when you do resumes, when you answer interview questions, it has to be the result first. Put the bottom line up front, answer the question. Then if time allows, or you feel like in the moment you can further describe, then you can use and contextualize the results that you got, how difficult they were. You had limited resources, you had limited time, you had limited funds. Then you can use the STAR method at the time and come back to the result. But the one thing that the STAR method also leaves off in the result is the ability to show humility, which is to always come back at the end of the answer and say, yes, I achieved this remarkable result. But you know what? Here's what I learned. Along the way, when we debrief this, when we did an after action review, a hot wash, whatever you want to call it, we probably could have done even a little bit better. Very proud of my team and what we brought together, but here's what I learned, and here's how we can make it even better. So always bottom line up front. If my wife asks me a question, you bet the bottom line up front is coming out, because the longer I talk, the more I'm sleeping in another room. That's how it comes down to it.
I hear that. So if you were talking in a production setting, you could say something like, within the first quarter, we increased the efficiency of equipment availability by 25% and exceeded production goals by 25%, and then
With
pause for a minute.
and with zero safety related injuries. Yeah. Exactly. That's how you do it. Now, because as an example, the resumes that they teach you in the military, they're lines and lines and lines of what you were responsible for.
Mm-hmm. Well, what did you accomplish?
Yes. What was the result? What did you do with that? Oh, you were a company commander of 200 people. Well, I've seen resumes of 1,000 company commanders. Did you make that company greater, and what were the results, or did you run it into the ground? Were you C4 on your combat readiness on your USR? What was it? So it always has to be the result. Ranked number one, evaluated number one out of 25, decreased budget by 25%, increased revenue by 150%. And for military people, as much as people talk about translating military skills, the one thing that translates across all languages are numbers.
Yes.
and we don't see enough of them. The only time I see them on a military resume is this is how many people I was responsible for. And then they say I was responsible for, not I directly led.
Right.
So even the words that we're choosing are poor, but results and numbers translate, and here's the other thing they do. If you put a result or a bullet achievement up there that says, I increased revenue by 25% year over year. Now, I know that doesn't come from the military, but I increased readiness 25% quarter over quarter. And second bullet is rank number 1 unit across this post for combat readiness. The context doesn't matter. As a manager, I'm going to ask you how you did that. And then you get to talk about the attributes that made you great.
Yeah, and all the management tasks that go into that, synchronizing tasks and resource and time and space to achieve organizational goals. And the P&L thing is big too. When you have a candidate who is going into an environment where there's a lot of profit and loss responsibility, where the dollar at the bottom of the right hand column is important, and they've never had P&L responsibility. How do they translate those results to demonstrate they possess the potential to be exceptional in that level of responsibility?
Military people have to understand that what they were doing in the military is the same thing that happens with P&L. Am I doing it faster, at a higher quality, for less money or less time? So again, go back to numbers. If I had $100 million training budget or whatever, you can translate that into came in under budget 25% and came in early on the project, cut the completion time in half. Those things people can extrapolate. I'm a hiring manager. I'm not stupid. I can simply go, okay, this person cares about cost, they care about time, and they care about resources. They'll be able to understand a P&L. And if you think about it, a P&L, what the company's asking you to do is be a good steward of resources.
Yep.
And contribute money to the bottom line. Who in the military hasn't done more with less? But they don't take the time to think about how to quantify that and then articulate what they've just quantified.
Well, that makes absolute sense. So you've really got to unpack your experience and look for the commonalities, create those targeted resumes that align with the job descriptions, and be prepared to show the relevance that your experience has in the job you're applying for. Am I right?
Absolutely. And I would tell you that, and I'm probably jumping ahead a little bit, but the number one mistake that all veterans make from E3s, and I've consulted and coached general officers and flag officers, they have no idea who they are and how they lead. There are what we call objective assets. I earned a bachelor's degree. I was ranked number 1 out of 50 in my BNOT class, my officer advanced course, or CGSC, whatever the course is. I was ranked number 2. I was ranked in the top 10%. Those are all objective facts. Where military people go wrong, even when they figure out how to quantify that, is they don't understand what makes them different. And I was coaching somebody probably about 6 months ago. He was a company commander, just like I was. The company commander, you could take platoon leader, you could take platoon sergeant, squad leader, pick your position. The person before you had the exact same job description that you had. The person who followed you had the exact same job description you had. Did you lead and operate and get the same results as the person before you or after you? And of course, the answer is no. So what were those results and how did you get them? The how are the adjectives, are the subjective assets that you have to articulate in an interview, because it's those subjective assets that give a hiring manager a very clear picture as to how you're going to operate as a team player and as a leader on their shop floor, out with their customers, inside their office building. It paints the picture. It's the context. I had to demonstrate resiliency, the team ability, creative problem solving, curiosity. There's 100 adjectives that you need to write down, and most military people really how they're learning, when we talk about their leadership, it's muscle memory. Oh, I watched the guy before me do it. They don't say that, but they're actually thrust into a situation and just start doing it. But they've never been asked to articulate it in an interview. And so most people, before they go to job search, before they get in the interview, need to take a very good, deep inventory of what makes you tick, what makes you different, and what makes you impactful, as well as doing the objective qualifications as to what you bring to the table.
Yeah, and it goes to that question. I've coached I don't know how many people to be prepared for what I always thought was the most important question. Tell me about yourself. What you kind of showed me when we talked, it was like, no, Luke, that's not the most important question. The most important question is tell me about your leadership style.
Exactly. And I will say this about the tell me about yourself. It's the most dangerous question. Number one, because you can get diarrhea of the mouth, to put it very simple. It's hard for people to know where to stop and start. But here's the thing. Tell me about yourself if you nail it. If you give the best answer I've ever heard as a hiring manager, your reward is question number 2. It doesn't get you the job.
What's the next question?
If you answer it poorly, you're out. And they're not listening to the rest of them. So technically, it's the most dangerous question that carries no value. You should focus on it. But leadership style is the foundation. If you can answer how you lead, communicate, delegate, empower, encourage, motivate, teach, coach, mentor, if you can accurately and impactfully and concisely state your leadership style, answering that well becomes the foundation for every other question they're going to throw at you. How do you problem solve? Well, you go back to how you lead, because we all begin by leading. Being a leader is by leading yourself first. So if you get that leadership question right, the rest of the questions will come from it. But military people live in muscle memory world, and they've never ever been asked to articulate how they lead, supervise, manage, coach, and mentor. And so without some thought, without writing it down, perfecting it, and as I tell people, write the answers down for God's sakes. I can't recall in business or the military a briefing that I've given where I haven't rehearsed it over and over and over. Professionals practice until they can't get it wrong. Write your leadership style down, grab a partner, grab a best friend, a spouse, and read it to them. And if they tilt their head like the dog, tilts their head when you're speaking English to a dog, and they kind of tilt their head and look at you sideways, you probably need to work on it a little bit. And so getting that leadership style down really is everything, because that question will come at you in multiple ways, and it will also be at the heart of all the other questions you get.
Now, and this may seem like a simple answer. How, if at all, should military leaders be prepared to adjust their leadership style? I know that it's not uncommon to have military leaders that are going 100 miles an hour, dragging everybody by their body armor. Follow me, let's go, let's get it done. I'm in charge. I have the answers. Just do what I tell you to do. I went into my first job after the military, and my boss gave me 2 words of advice with respect to my leadership and supervisory talents, if you want to use that word. He just looked at me and said, "Luke, slow down."
Yeah. The first piece of advice that I give to folks when talking about their leadership style, you're not changing how you lead. The principles of how you lead in the military are the same principles that you're going to use in the corporate world to lead. I mean, the people that are in the corporate world, frankly, if you look at the population of the military and the population of the corporate world demographically, can you see a lot of difference? No, they're people. So how you lead, motivate, coach, train, and support, you don't have to change that style. You just have to make sure that your answer says something to the effect of, and by the way, please, God, don't say I lead by example. It's overused at this point.
It's cliche.
What you have to be talking about is, a concept, I know my friend Rich Deviney, who wrote the book Attributes, uses the term dynamic subordination, which is a leader is in the best spot, and I'm abbreviating, he does a much better job. A leader is where they need to be to affect the mission success the most. Does that mean I'm leading from the front and setting the example? Maybe. Does it mean I'm in the middle because I'm pushing forward a lot of people and I'm controlling people at the rear? Or does it mean that I'm kind of step back and coaching and mentoring these people through this evolution or this environment? And so understanding that you play a lot of different roles as a leader, a commander, a communicator, a delegator, a supporter. You might be a follower. How many times when I was a company commander that, look, I didn't have the best idea, and I'm going to throw that around the room and say, listen, this is what we got to do. We got a short period of time. Here's my best approach. What do you guys think? Poke holes in it. Let's go with the best idea wins. Collaboration. That is collaboration right there. So articulate that to somebody, that your leadership style, it isn't situational. Your principles are still the same, but how you're leading depends on the circumstance, the mission, the resources, the assets that you have, and how you're going to communicate what success looks like, how you're going to assign those resources, how you're going to motivate, coach, and mentor those resources, and how you're going to make sure that people are working together to achieve, a team result.
Awesome. Just we could go on for another half an hour, and I'm sure we'd unpack just more great stuff here. But as we wind down to the end of the show, let me get you that last question, the one that I love to ask all my guests. If you could deliver just one piece of advice to a transitioning service member, veteran job seeker, a milspouse job seeker for their successful transition into civilian employment, what would that one piece of advice be today, George?
I'm going to break the rules and say two. Number one,
go for it.
Know yourself. On the civilian and the military side, people in interviews, the number one thing that goes wrong, the reason they have problem answering questions or they're thinking on the fly, is because they don't know what makes them tick, what they're good at. That's part one. Once you figure that out, then as I said, professionals practice until they can't get it wrong. Write down the top 30 questions, write down your answers, and practice. It doesn't make you robotic. What it does is make you comfortable when you're in one of the most stressful environments you're going to be in. Hey, I got to earn this money. I got to get this job to take care of my family. Know yourself and practice. Do not think you can do this stuff off the cuff, because if you come up to somebody like me, that's a 3-second drill when I know you're tap dancing in front of me, and then we're done.
Absolutely. George, I can't thank you enough for being here today. More pearls of wisdom in there than I could count. George, if people want to hear more from you, connect with you, or find your book, where should they go?
LinkedIn, George Randall, except it's candle, spelled like candle, except with an R, R-A-N-D-L-E. And they can find a link to the book, The Talent War, How Special Operations and Great Organizations Win on Talent. But by all means, connect with me on LinkedIn. Happy to field questions. I answer almost all of my in-mail messages, and always like to help veterans. Been doing it pro bono for decades. We'll just say that much.
Well, I'm glad you were able to take some time to be with us today, George. I really appreciate it.
Hey, thank you so much.
All right. And for those of you out there in the audience who haven't already done so, do yourself a solid. Head on over to www.recruitmilitary.com. When you get there, you'll find over 400,000 job opportunities from 16,000 employers, job opportunities, career opportunities around the world and around the corner. Recruit Military is on a mission to help veterans, transitioning service members, and milspouses find meaningful employment. On behalf of Recruit Military and the folks that joined us today, thank you very much, George, for being on the show.
Thank you, sir.
And for all you RM Live fans out there, tune in next week when we talk with Justin Jokins, former Army officer and project manager. He started his transition on one side of the desk as a candidate at a Recruit Military job fair, and just recently he's stepped to the other side of the table as an exhibitor. We're going to hear his perspective from both angles. You won't want to miss that. Until next time, this has been Lucas Connolly for Recruit Military. Good luck and Godspeed.